know it's been a while since the last video, and I keep saying that in every single video, but I promise I'm gonna get back to a consistent posting schedule at some point. The last couple months for me have just been insane, and I've been working my ass off trying to get this project done, along with some other stuff that I'm working on. So yeah, sorry for the lack of videos, but in today's video, I wanted to talk about my finished bike, or the most recent project I've been working on, which is the Java CB550. When Monster comes knocking on the door, you want to do the best job you possibly can. So everything that I was working on previous was just kind of put to the side, and I put all my attention and all my focus to make sure that this bike was something that I would deliver that was probably one of the best, most well-finished motorcycles that I've ever built. So in today's video, I wanted to talk about kind of the things that I did on this bike, the fit and finishes, the parts I used, some of the fabrication work, the exhaust, go over it in a fine detail way so that I can show you what I did and how I did it. So if you're into that, stick around, let's jump into the video. All right, so first up, we're gonna talk about the exhaust. Now, the exhaust was probably the most time-consuming part on this motorcycle, especially not having the right tools to do it. But I knew I had to build one because there's nothing like this on the market as of right now. And the whole intention of this bike was for it to be bold and kind of a standout piece. So the exhaust is made out of stainless steel, and I don't have a tube bender to bend these radiuses. What I actually ended up doing was 3D printing the same exact tube, but knowing what the centerline radius was of each bend helped significantly. So what I used was a couple 2-inch centerline radius bends, 180-degree bends, a couple 3-inch centerline radius bends, and then pieced them together to make the bends that you see here. Now the hardest part about this was not having a tool that could cut straight or exactly at an angle, because every single angle just magnifies how off the pipe can be in the back, and I needed to make sure that at least to right here these were pointing straight back, so that when I did run the long length of tube, I knew the exhaust would end up where it was supposed to end up. Yeah, so it was quite the handful to do, very big project on this bike, but I'm extremely happy on how it turned out. Now, I've had some people ask, yeah, well, doesn't it burn your leg? Yes, it can burn your leg. If you touch it, it'll burn your leg. But it's tucked up against the frame enough, and your foot sits far enough out on this peg that when you're riding, you really don't notice it. It's not an issue at all. And to be honest, this bike is a showpiece. If I was gonna ride 3,000 miles across the United States, probably wouldn't have this set up, but that's not the intended use for this bike. It needs to look cool. Towards the end of the exhaust, we have like the mufflers. Now the mufflers are just a bigger diameter tube, and they're thicker. So it's a thicker tube that I then machined some kind of like adapters on the lathe so that this tube would fit into that tube, and then I welded it clean and polished it. So yeah, this thing sounds mean. It's pretty cool. I wasn't expecting the sound that comes out of it. It sounds very throaty and deep, which is unique because the CB550 really sounds like an inline 4 where it'll just scream, but this has like almost like a hot rod type sound to it, which is pretty cool. Next up is the gas tank, and the gas tank, yes, it's a stock gas tank, stock CB or a later year CB550 gas tank. It doesn't have the gas cap that's extruding out of the top of the tank. It's got the gas cap cover. Now the tank itself was in really good shape. It didn't have any dents or anything major in terms of like the panel or ripples or anything in the sheet metal. So that's why I wanted to use this tank, is because there was going to be a lot less body work that needed to go into it. Now the badges have been completely removed from the tank, which that can be a nightmare if you're going to try to do that. It's a very easy way to put a hole in your gas tank, not realize it, and then paint the thing, and then watch the paint ripple off the side as you put gas into the tank. So the design of the tank itself was actually a collaboration between me and this very talented illustrator named Shraven. I'll put his Instagram right here. Traditionally, most of the bikes that I build are very clean, like single color bikes with chrome finishes or stainless finishes, just clean, right? And so when they approached me to do this bike, like the bold branding and the style of the brand of the Java line of products is very different to my style. So I reached out to Shraven and just got another set of eyes on it. He came up with a couple ideas that we then pitched to Monster. They chose this design, which at first I was kind of skeptical, but the way that it turned out, I'm extremely happy. So yeah, follow Shraven. He helped me out with this. The guy's awesome, really cool, and he did a great job. Now the inside of the gas tank was completely stripped, cleaned of all the rust, and then lined with Pour 15 tank sealer, which people have had issues with those in the past. I've never had them. I literally have used them on every single bike. It's all in the prep to make sure that your tank sealer works. Now the gas cap, you can't really see it here, but I actually re-welded the lift mechanism so that the thing would actually be straight, like the door would be straight and the seams would be straight, which turned into a bunch of work that I didn't foresee coming, but yeah, it came out great. Now the paint itself was painted by a company called Airtrix. Now Airtrix is one of the best best companies for custom paint in the industry, in my opinion. I knew that they were gonna nail the design. I did a lot of like initial CAD mock-ups of this design to see how it would look on the bike. And so when I handed it off to them, I knew that I was gonna get exactly what I was looking for from Airtrix. Not only does it look like the design that I gave them, or is exactly the design that I gave them, the finish is crazy. Sometimes when you send paint out, you'll see like where they, taped it, and then you'll see like a step or a ridge in the lines. This thing is completely flat. It almost looks like it was a water slide or something that they just like printed out and put on. It's absolutely flawless, and I couldn't be more happy. Airtrix is an amazing painter out of Santa Barbara. They're pricey, but you know what you're gonna get when you send them work. So check them out. I'll leave a link in the description. Airtrix, they're the best. All right, so moving on to the side covers. The side covers I think are important to mention because yes, they look stock and they look like they're in the stock position, but I actually cut off all of the tabs and moved them in about a 1/2 inch on both sides. The reason I did that is because I knew that this exhaust was gonna be running down the side and I needed to make some clearance for the exhaust and the side covers so that they didn't hit. I think it looks really good. It kind of slimmed up the rear of the bike a little bit, and the design flows from the gas tank onto these side covers. Now, the one thing I didn't mention about the gas tank, the finish is actually a satin finish. It's not a gloss, and so I think that just adds some dimension to the whole design, and really makes the tank and the side covers kind of stand out from the other components on the bike. Moving on to the seat. Now, the seat is a custom made seat that came from a company called Saddlemen. Saddlemen is probably the leading seat company for custom Harley seats, and they do a lot of other bikes too, primarily Harley stuff, but they did a phenomenal job. I mean, this thing is absolutely flawless, and it's a custom design. So I basically gave them the seam, kind of like the seam position where those seams would land, and the material choices, and then also the embroidered monster claw on the top here, and they took care of it. Now this is a 2 material seat, so I have leather on the side, leather here on this little inset, and then up top is like a gripper material, which is super nice. This whole seat is built off of a neoprene foam that I ordered and shaped, along with a aluminum seat pan that I kind of cut out, shaped, put all of the mounting points on, and then just handed off. They crushed it. Go check out Saddlemen. They're the best in the game. All right, so moving on to the front of the motorcycle. So To start it off, we have a 6-inch headlight that's all black. It's got the grate or the cage on the front. I don't know what to call those, but it really ties into the look of this whole bike. I ran an amber lens for the same reason. It really ties in with that tan and the brown, and it just gives it like a gritty look. Works pretty good too. I don't know how often you're probably gonna be riding this thing at night, so yeah, it's all about aesthetics, right? The headlight mount itself is actually something that I found on Amazon. I really like the look of it, and it's built really well. I had to do some things like replace the hardware and kind of like make sure that it was sound. It is from Amazon ultimately. But yeah, the metal itself is pretty great, and it's machined well, and it looks really good. Moving on to the forks. So I'm running fork boots on this bike. Now the fork boots don't really do much other than widen the fork itself. Now, if you pull this down and you look at the fork leg, these are wimpy little 35mm fork legs. And without them, it looks skinny up front. It's kind of weird looking, to be honest, unless it's an all chrome bike or something like that calls for it. On top of that, we have the polished fork legs, which really adds some like shine to the front end. And then that's all holding the front wheel. The front wheel is a brand new rim with the stock hub, all brand new bearings, and was completely rebuilt. So yeah, the width, which the tire question I get all the time. These are stock tires. This tire is actually a 3.50. That's the width of the tire. So 3.50, 19 in the front, and then I think a 4.18 in the rear. So yeah, there's the tire question. Let's just get that out of the way. Moving on to the front brake. It's the stock front brake caliper that's been completely rebuilt. All of the grime and all of the things from over the years that can get into where the piston sits in these things is pretty insane. But yeah, you can polish them out, make sure there's no divots or anything in the actual mating surface, and then new seals, and these things stop pretty well. The disc itself is brand new. I got that one from 4-in-1. It's a solid disc. They have versions with drilled holes. You're not going that fast on these bikes. You don't need drilled holes. But yeah, that kind of wraps out the front end. The one trick thing that I did that I hadn't done on any of my other bikes is I have a little speedo sensor that I 3D printed the mount for right here. Now, if you look at like new bikes, they sometimes have the speedo sensor built into the fork like this. And I just 3D printed it so that it can pick up off one of the bolts that I drilled a hole into and set the magnet in for the speedo sensor. It's a great little solution, and you can do that in a lot of places. The one thing that I do like about mounting the speedo sensor at the front of the bike is that it can run up to the headlight bucket or your speedo with the brake line. So yeah, I 3D printed some brake line clips that run the speedo sensor wire up into the speedo. All right, so moving on to the controls. At the front of the bike, we have the mini scope from Moto Gadget. Now this is a great little speedo. It's about the size of a 1.5-inch little pill, and it does RPM readout, speed readout, and it all works off of that sensor in the front. It's an amazing little gadget. You know, if you want a clean and simple solution for speedo, you gotta have one. Now, that's mounted with a 3D printed part that I made. If you guys want one of those for some reason, or you're looking for some way to mount it to the handlebars like I have here, let me know. I can make those. I can put them in the store. They're pretty simple to do for me. But yeah, great little system. I run it on most of my bikes that need speedos, and yeah. Moving on to the buttons, I have a little kind of 2-button switch right here. The top one is to start it. The bottom one is for the high beam, low beam. You can ask about the blinkers later, I guess. And then I have a brand new master cylinder for the front brake. This has a switch in it, so I didn't have to do any other switches. I just linked my switch to my brake, and when you pull the lever, it turns on the brake. So yeah. The bars actually came from Builtwell. These are their low tracker bars, and they're great. A lot of problems can happen when you order a cheap set of bars that have been powder coated, because the diameter of the bar then changes, and when you go to clamp it into your clamps, it just won't clamp because the powder coat is in the way. These guys, I forgot what the process is called, but the paint kind of keeps the part true to size so that you don't run into any of those issues when trying to mount handlebars. So yeah, the grips, these are just some basic grips that I got from 4-in-1 as well. They are extremely great. They're cheap, and I think they look good. You don't really need anything over the top in terms of like grips. You kind of want them to do their job and look the part, but to go crazy on grips, it's just not my style. This is one of the most interesting parts of the bike, I think. You know, originally when I was building this bike, the first impression I had when they asked me to build something for them was, this is going to be a display bike. Now that since has changed, and you better follow Monster Energy because I think they're going to do something extremely cool with this bike. But yeah, my initial idea was like, how am I going to tie the product into the build itself? And this came to mind. Now this was all designed and developed in CAD. I had the width and the dimension of the frame that I needed. I also knew how far I wanted to sit back off the back of the bike. And then I also had the can. So with all of that, I was able to design this in CAD, send it to a company called Send Cut Send, which this video is not sponsored by them. If you know anyone there, let them know that I'm using their stuff and I use their service, and I would love to do something with them. But yeah, Send Cut Send, they cut all these parts out. I welded it. I actually made it out of stainless because originally I thought that this was going to be kind of like a brushed stainless. But yeah, the basket itself was made from Send Cut Send, and then these side, kind of like the sides of the basket were actually just hand fabricated here in the shop. And what I did is I 3D printed this first, this whole thing. I 3D printed it to make sure that the size and the dimensions and everything were good. And then from there, I used that as a template to make this box. So yeah, it's got a cool Monster inset there and Monster logo on the side here. And then the 3D printed can inset was pretty cool too. Since I had built this in CAD, it was very straightforward. All I had to do was take this dimension of the can, make a rectangle, inset it into that rectangle, and then offset it by a certain amount. So the can is propped up at like a 15-degree angle, and it makes it look really cool. So yeah, I'm extremely happy with this. It came out great. There are some things that I would probably do differently next time, but it was a great learning experience. Oh yeah, and then I learned about wood because I've never worked with wood ever in my life. This is some exotic type of wood that's similar to teak, I believe. And if you don't know what teak is, try to go buy just one like 1 inch by 6 foot by 4 inch wide piece of teak right now. It'll run you about $285 or something, which is crazy. But for this bike, exotic wood on the side, just to tie into the branding and everything like that. All right, so we made our way to the back of the bike. The one thing I wanted to talk about here is actually the rear light. Now, I've inset these LED tail lights into many bikes before. The one thing that I did on this bike that's been different is the inset that I made this tail light with. Now, I 3D printed this and then set the light inside of it and then put it into the rear loop here. And I think it ties it together really well, making it more finished looking and holding the light a lot better. There's some kits on eBay or wherever that kind of like, they have like a spray foam in there with a light already inset in there, but you can't paint it without taping it. It's a weird setup. This gets away from that and kind of holds the light outside where you want it to be. And you can position this light so that it's center in there, and you just have a lot more freedom, all while making it look like a manufactured piece that a manufacturer would put on their motorcycles. So super stoked on that. And yeah, that's the rear light. Now the engine is completely stock. It's stock displacement. And the reason I did that is because I want this bike to be reliable. It didn't need to have performance parts on it. It didn't need to be crazy fast. And stock pistons and the stock OEM parts are usually the most reliable. Now, the engine itself was completely vapor blasted and disassembled. There was nothing that I did not touch on this engine. It has brand new bearings, a brand new valve job. It's got, you know, all brand new gaskets. The clutch went through. It has brand new clutch plates and springs. The primary chain on the bottom of the engine, those tend to get loose, or they grow because of wear. They get slack in them, and that's pretty much the majority of the problems that these CB550s have, is like those primary chains start to rattle, and then you'll start to hear it in the engine. This engine sounds like a sewing machine. It's very quiet. It runs super smooth. The carbs themselves are stock as well. They have been vapor blasted as well and completely gone through. Obviously, there's some jetting changes that had to be done in order to run this exhaust, but it wasn't as drastic as I thought it would be. This exhaust is not like a wide open 4-into-1. It's pretty similar to stock with the exception of the mufflers in the back. Now, I went up 5 main sizes, 1 pilot size, and then I pulled the needle up 1 clip position on all 4, obviously. Now, the intake system itself is like a bread box style intake system that I got from Cognito Moto. The one thing about these carburetors is that they hate pod filters and they hate velocity stacks. The reason for that is because they like a slow pull of air that's controlled. They don't like this erratic air being rushed in, which is quite the contrary to some of these racing carburetors where you're just trying to stuff as much air into the carburetor for more performance. These like a slow drip of air, very controlled, very tame, and they tend to run really well. Most people will have issues when they pull the stock airbox out, but in this case with the Cognito system, it'll mitigate a lot of that. It's not perfect, but it will mitigate a lot of the issues that you would run once you pulled off the stock airbox. All right, so that's a walkthrough of the Java project. Now, I am extremely grateful for all of the subscribers that have already been subscribed to this channel. But if you're new here, please be sure to hit that like and subscribe button. If you have any questions about how I did something or the parts that I used, or you're just stuck on a subject that you can't get through, or your bike's not running and you need help, let me know. I can help you out. I'm happy to answer questions. But yeah, for now, this is what I got. Check it out on Instagram, check out Monster Energy. But until next time, see ya.